Hey all, here are OS Reviews. In this video, we're taking a quick look at the RisoPhy PC423. This is a 75% wireless mechanical keyboard that has a pretty cool design and also features a built-in LCD screen that can show your current connection mode, time and date, as well as the lighting effects that you can control directly on here, in addition to customize it with your favorite image or GIF. So it has a 5-layer gasket-mounted structure, claims to be well padded and stabilized, featuring linear switches as well as RGB backlighting as well to give it a more interesting touch in darker environments. And aside from the keycaps, you can also swap the switches underneath if you want a different typing sensation in the future. So pretty easy to customize, featuring a 6,000 mAh capacity battery. Can also be used in a USB wired mode in addition to having a 2.4G wireless nano receiver mode as an alternative to Bluetooth. With all of these custom keycaps inspired by 8-bit games, including a little Game Boy here as well as Pac-Man figure, the pricing isn't as bad as I expected. For instance, right now you can find it for $80 plus a $20 coupon can bring it down to just $60. It looks like the cost of these mechanical keyboards as a whole is starting to come down lower, which is good to see. There's also an optional companion software that you can download on Windows if you want to customize the macro shortcuts, push your favorite image or GIF over to the display, as well as change the backlight. Last but not least, specifically these linear cream switches have an activation force of 45 grams. Again, the presentation here is done quite well, and we have just some of these specs reiterated on the rear with this shiny rainbow effect going on. Can also be an interesting gift idea, and it pulls out using a drawer-like design to the box, and even the keyboard itself comes in its own little carrying pouch. So again, for just a $60 keyboard, I do have to say that the presentation do seem to be more premium than expected. And inside this smaller box, you'll also find the USB Type-C to Type-A wire cable for charging, as well as using it if you don't want to connect wirelessly. It can also be extended by just pulling it a little bit. And you'll also find a 2-in-1 keycap as well as switch puller for customizing it, as well as 2 extra key switches here as well. So we can see that it's yellow and black in color. As for the keyboard itself, so it looks like they have gone all out here. It's not only the keycaps themselves that have been customized, but even the keyboard deck is aligned with the retro gaming theme, including some decorative stickers here that state level up, loading, and then on the very back here we have access to a switch that you can use if you're typing using a Windows computer versus a Mac OS computer. That's going to change some of the shortcut commands, as well as the Type-C port. There's also the nano receiver that is stuck into place magnetically if you want to use it, also labeled, and then located on the right hand side you also get a dial or knob control for changing the volume, and it's quite satisfying to use, and you can also press down on it as a play-pause control as well. Not bad, and you can see there's a slight angle to the design, making it a little bit more ergonomic as you are typing. The screen here is just positioned on the top right-hand corner, and we have a power switch here on the left, and a very retro design here, an oversized switch to turn the entire thing on or off. And here's what the back of the keyboard looks like. So it continues with a red and white theme, some soft touch rubber to prevent it from sliding around onto a surface or desk, but otherwise there are no additional feet that can pop up because it's already at a slightly slanted angle anyways. The shell of the keyboard, though, is constructed out of polycarbonate plastic compared to metal or aluminum, so it's a little bit on the lighter side, but at least it's not too hollow or cheap feeling. Didn't really notice too much flexing, for instance, as I'm handling it, even though it is plastic and not metal at the end of the day. All in all, I think they've done a pretty convincing job with the design and presentation. I do think all the accent work here does give it a convincing vibe, like it stepped out of an 80s or 90s desktop, a keyboard that perhaps you would have seen bundled with an IBM computer back in the day. And we do have some of these kind of pixel art inspired keycaps as well, and they are actually quite comfortable when it comes to the ergonomics, making it easy enough as you are resting your fingers on top and typing along. And just a closer look here, some of the arrow keys, the icons at least, have been changed to match what you might find from a Game Boy controller instead. Plus the Alt function and control keys have also been changed into these token icons that you may see in some of those 8-bit games, including Mario, for instance. So if you're a touch typist, it should be fine, but if you're not, it may take some acclimation to get used to. And it looks like in the packaging, they haven't included some more traditional keycaps for you to switch between between. That would have been a nice touch, allowing you to convert back to more traditional icons if you preferred, but it is what it is. You can do that yourself, but just keep that in mind. So using another keyboard here as a visual aid, we can tell that this is technically the Shift key, the game start is going to be the Enter key, as well as this is going to be the backspace key, and then here on the left, this is going to be the Escape key, as well as the Start button is really just another Shift key. So that is one compromise of going for a more playful design, but overall, not too bad, I would say. What I do like is we have a dedicated row for function versus the numbers 1 through 9 here, compared to on some 68% keyboards that are even more compact, might try to squish those rows into one. But of course, on here, we don't have a dedicated numpad on the side, since it still is a pretty compact 75% keyboard at the end of the day. So let's also go ahead and pull off one of the keycaps. You can see that underneath we have the same key switch that we saw there from earlier, as well as the lighting here is pointing north and then shining upwards. And so if we dim all the lights around us, you can see that this is what the keyboard will look like. The letters themselves don't actually physically shine through. It's a similar comment that we've mentioned on some recent keyboards we've seen from Melgeek. So on the plus side, it does mean that the keycaps themselves should be a little bit more wear resistant to things like oil. The letters here shouldn't fade over time as easily, but the downside is, again, if you're not a touch typist, it may be a little bit more difficult to make out the specific letters and symbols in a really dark environment. The lighting, though, does seem to be relatively consistent. Now, going through some of the modes here of the display, again, we're able to check if we're currently connecting using Bluetooth versus the 2.4G wireless nano receiver modes. And speaking of Bluetooth, you have up to 3 different profiles that you can save. Similar to multi-point connectivity, you compare to a computer, a phone, and a tablet, and then tap here to switch back and forth between those 3 devices. And to pair to a device, you can tap on the function key plus 1, 2, or 3, hold for a few seconds to enter the pairing mode for that particular profile until that key there starts to flash. And we're able to choose between Bluetooth 5.0 or Bluetooth 3.0, so it has a dual kind of Bluetooth chip inside. Let's tap on the first one, for instance, and once paired, we can also check out the battery percentage remaining on the keyboard itself, plus we'll be able to navigate around the UI here just fine. It is a universal keyboard, compatible with pretty much any OS, whether it's Linux, Android, iOS, iPadOS, PC, and Windows. But again, if you're trying to download the companion driver or software for further customizing shortcut commands, you'll have to use a desktop. But for purposes like typing, you can pair it with pretty much any device out there. Which, speaking of, if you want the time and date settings to be correctly adjusted, you have to sync it using the optional driver or companion software on your computer. So just keep that in mind. It would have been nice if this automatically synced, even if you're using an Android or iPhone, but at the moment, again, you have to rely on that optional driver. You can see the power percentage, though, here on the top right, and all the icons continue with the whole 8-bit gaming theme. When it comes to the lighting effects, we can tap on function and the delete key to change the individual color. So you can make it a single shade, including red versus yellows, as well as greens and blues that you can pick between, as well as a white color here. And you can change the brightness level tapping on function up and down arrow keys to make it brighter versus a little bit dimmer, as you can tell there, until it goes completely off if you want to consume less power. In addition to change the speed of the animations here by tapping on the right arrow key to speed it up, as well as the left arrow key to make it a slower animation. So that is the single colors that you can change. We can also tap on the function and insert key to go into other lighting modes. For instance, this one here is a kind of reactive one that will ripple outwards into kind of a rainbow effect and then turn off after a couple of seconds. Let's also speed up the animation speed here to make it dance along a little bit more quickly. I think some of these reactive modes are perhaps better suited as a display piece, so it looks cool as it's going there on the desk, almost like a night light or mood light, but arguably not the most practical if you're trying to see the letters in a darker environment. Then one of the rainbow patterns or always on might be a little bit better. But anyways, we have plenty of modes that you can pick between. Here is one that will ripple through the rows one at a time, almost like a snake. Let's go into a next one here, which is more, again, of a memory one that will fade after a couple of seconds after you've pressed on a key. Once more here into one that kind of bounces there into the center and then ripples outwards once again. Once again into another kind of V-shaped or sine wave that will ripple across the entire keyboard. And here's one which is a kind of center point that then ripples outwards, which I think is another one that's quite practical, looking quite good. And the next one here is going to be a static color that won't be moving around anymore. It's stuck on this single frame. And another one which is a bit more rainbow colored or candy colored, I would say. The next one is still reactive, but then will splinter across the entire row, as you can tell there, that you are clicking on, disappearing after a couple of seconds. Next one here is another larger spiral pattern. Next one here is also going to be kind of a random pattern that is bouncing along the keyboard's parameter, almost like falling rain. And here is a breathing mode that will go through all the different colors, shining and flashing one at a time, also looking pretty neat. Although this model does not have a built-in microphone, so it can't really react to the beat of music, unlike some of the past models that we've seen. Here's a slightly more smoother gradient effect going through all the colors one at a time, and then going back to the original one there we saw at the beginning. Also, if you're currently paired to a device, after around 10 minutes of inactivity, it will lower the brightness here to consume less power, and after around 30 minutes, it will go into a sleep mode until you tap on a key to wake it up again. And for some additional controls on the LCD screen, you can tap on the dial or knob to go through some additional controls, including one here for lighting. So this is an alternative to looping through the animations one at a time. You can see it labeled a little more clearly here. For instance, the sine wave versus snake that we saw there from earlier, ripple, wave, neon, breathing. You can find these just by using the dial there to scroll through, as well as tap on OK to select. And the next one here also allows us to change the brightness as well as the animation speed, again using the dial to make it a little bit brighter versus dimmer, as you saw there, as well as the animation speed, faster versus slower. Next one here also allows us to change the individual color again to a single shade instead. You can have that for all of the animations that we saw there from earlier, or go into that rainbow mode. In addition to the language settings of the keyboard here can also be set to either English or Chinese. Would be nice to see a couple of other languages there, but it is what it is. And you can also tap to go back onto the main screen. So those are the controls that you can access from the knob here directly. Next, doing a quick sound and typing test. So overall, I would say that it's a relatively satisfactory typing experience. I think it sounds clacky enough. And for a plastic chassis, at least it doesn't really rattle or shake as you're typing down. It still feels pretty well stabilized. That being said, if we are being super nitpicky, is it the most thocky or most consistent sound in the world, particularly as you're transitioning between the spacebar versus the letters? Probably not. I have heard slightly more satisfying keyboards, but those tend to be a bit more premiumly priced as well. I think this is perfectly adequate, I would say, for the vast majority of folks looking for just a simple pre-built keyboard that has an interesting aesthetic to it. It still is very comfortable though in terms of the layout and will feel better compared to pretty much all of the built-in keyboards you get from a laptop, which have much more shallow keycaps at the end of the day. This thing still feels a bit more satisfying as you are clicking on it. And again, at least it's not too loud, so if you are working in a slightly more shared space, it shouldn't distract people as much compared to if you're using blue switches, for instance. This is still a linear switch keyboard at the end of the day. And from a responsiveness and latency point of view, I would say Bluetooth 5.0 is still going to be quite good when it comes to just general typing, things like emails. It doesn't really miss too many keystrokes, as you can tell there. It still feels quite responsive as every key there is being pressed down. But if you're more of a competitive gamer, then you'll get the lowest latency possible using the wired connection mode for the fastest polling rate possible. But generally speaking, again, if you're using this just for work, as well as, again, typing, writing out documents, I think the wireless connectivity at least wasn't too problematic from a connection point of view. So that is more or less it as far as our quick hands-on review of, again, the RisoPhy PC423A wireless 75% mechanical keyboard. That name is a little bit of a mouthful. And all in all, I would say the most impressive thing about this model is that they have created a completely original design, including the shell of the deck, as well as all the keycaps, for a relatively entry-level price. Just 2 or 3 years back, a keyboard with this degree of customization would have probably cost easily 2 times the price. But now that mechanical keyboards have gotten a bit more popular, it looks like the cost of production has also come down, which is good to see. So if you do like the retro design, as well as that 8-bit gamer vibe that this keyboard is inspired by, I would say it's not bad. You can check out more details if interested in the links down below, but for now that's been our video. Thanks for watching here at OS Reviews. Again, that has been the RisoPhy retro gaming inspired PC423A mechanical keyboard.